Hieronymous tries to open his eyes, but finds that it takes him considerable effort to do so. He blinks a few times, trying to make sense of his surroundings. He sees a starchy white ceiling overhead, and the familiar ornate ceiling trim assured him that he was back at Ravane Cottage. Did that mean he was back? Or had he simply descended into another layer into hell? What new nightmare would he need to escape from this time? He tries to move his fingers, tries to move his neck from side to side, but his muscles don't seem to work. He starts with his knuckles first, bending and flexing them, trying to get blood to flow back into his joints. He moves his feet from side to side, slowly trying to get his body to come to life again. Using what felt like the last of his strength, he slowly moves his hand up to his chest. The stone. It was there. It was really there. The sound of sobbing from somewhere nearby hits his ears, and Hieronymous manages to turn his head to one side to see a girl in a long period dress kneeling in front of the window. A small cot has been set up there, and she kneels before it with her elbows resting on the dense fabric. She has her hands clasped around the stone around her neck as she presses it to her forehead, as if in prayer, but her shoulders heave up and down as she sobs. He just manages to get a glimpse of blue hair as the moonlight strikes her, and his heart goes out to her immediately. Tori. He opens his mouth to speak, but it feels like he hadn't had a drink in years, and his lips are stretched tightly over his gums. He tries again, tries to will his voice to speak, but nothing comes. He lies there for he didn't know how long, just watching her cry. Turn around. Just turn around, Tori. I'm here. I'm here. He tried reaching out to her with his mind, but she didn't turn around. Was his magic still even intact? He holds his wrist only a few inches off the bed and tries to summon a small ball of light into it. It takes considerable effort and work, but eventually he's able to do it, creating a small orb only about the size of a marble. It fizzles out almost immediately, but he was still able to do it. He still had his magic. He couldn't take this any longer. Maybe he really was dead, and this was the second layer of hell. Maybe he was seeing Tori right in front of him, crying and scared and alone, and he would never be able to get up and comfort her. He was able to see her, but she would always be there waiting for him, just out of his reach. No, he absolutely could not let that happen. He had figured a way out of his first test, and he could overcome the second. Using as much energy as he could muster, he used a strength spell to make his body stronger. Immediately, he can feel his limbs start to move a little bit easier, but it still took considerable effort. Slowly, he manages to use his limbs to propel himself to the edge of the bed, almost rolling as he moves. He rolls his legs out of bed first, trying to stand, but his back doesn't seem to want to bend. Instead, he just lets his upper body slowly slide out of bed. It barely makes any sound as he lands on the thick plush carpet, but he did feel pain, and that was a good thing. He had been able to feel pain in his dream, but it was always muted, like he was living through the memory of pain and not pain itself. But why would Tori not turn to look at him? Maybe it wasn't Tori at all, but a demon in disguise. If that was the case, then he would have to remain alert. Slowly, he creeps towards her on his hands and knees, moving like an infant learning to crawl for the first time. His limbs seemed too long, too gawky, but he had to do this. He had to get to Tori. With only a brief moment of hesitation, he reaches out and puts his hand on her shoulder. Tori sat by her cot in front of the window and cried, much as she had done every single night since their return. The bed was big enough to hold the both of them, even if they weren't touching, but sharing a bed with the man who was dreaming of his ex just felt wrong in a way she couldn't describe, and so she slept in a cot by his bedside, close enough that she could still reach out and hold his hand while he slept. She occasionally had to travel to Shetlock or other places in order to assume the duties of a viscount, but she was never gone for long. The lie was always the same. Lord Grabiner has taken ill, and he has sent me in his place. He has deemed me competent to carry out his duties as viscount. Do you doubt his judgment? The answer was always the same. No, Lady Grabiner, as you will it. But the months had started to take their toll on her. She had plenty of support from the Blazing family, from Bedge and his family, but their assistance with her new viscount duties couldn't heal what really ailed her. The role was demanding, sure, but it was nowhere near as taxing as returning each night to take care of him. Every single day she would wake up to see him by her side, just sleeping, and every single day she prayed that this was the day that he would wake up, that he would open his eyes and sweep her up in his arms and tell her he was back. Every single day she found herself disappointed. She had tried to enter his mind again several times, but she couldn't. She couldn't get into his dream, and she wasn't sure if Hieronymous was somehow trying to keep her out, or if perhaps she was unintentionally keeping herself out, too afraid to see Hieronymous living out his storybook happy life with someone else. She didn't know what to do, and that was the hardest part. After only a few months, she realized that she couldn't keep going like this. She could not keep playing the role of a viscount. There was too much about the magical community that she didn't know, and there was so much about tax law and financial matters that she didn't even care to learn. This was Hieronymus's duty, not hers. He was born into this life, not her. It wasn't fair that she was saddled with his burden while her husband slept soundly in bed, living out his fairy tale life with another woman. She didn't want to grow resentful, but she couldn't help it. She was absolutely miserable and lonely and heartbroken. She had been doing so well this year, staying out of trouble and focusing on her education with the promise that she would get to travel around the world with Hieronymus after she graduated. Well, that graduation deadline had come and gone, and she hadn't even reached out to Potsdam. Potsdam hadn't reached out to her either, but graduating high school seemed so trivial when she was charged with maintaining the finances of an entire domain. She hadn't heard from her friends either, although, to be fair, she hadn't really responded to any of their letters. She meant to, but then one day became two became a week, and how do you respond to someone after a full month has passed? At least it helped her forgive Hieronymus for not writing to her as frequently as she would have liked. She could now understand how busy he had been, but she could not understand how she was supposed to live the rest of her life this way. Part of her wanted to reach out to Melodia and ask her to wake him up. Maybe he would hate her for separating him from his beloved, but so what? At least she wouldn't have to be Viscountess anymore. She could just go back to Iris Academy, beg Potsdam to let her finish up school until she graduated, and then figure things out from there. Either as a Viscountess or as a normal magical student, it didn't seem that Hieronymus was going to be a part of her future, and she was starting to make peace with that fact. It had only been a few months, but the constant negativity, the constant doubt, the constant sense of anger and betrayal that never went away was wearing her down, and even if Hieronymus did suddenly wake up one day, she suddenly wasn't so sure that they could just continue their relationship like nothing had happened. They could try, but would it ever be the same? She didn't know, and that creeping sense of uncertainty that permeated her to her core seemed to be her only companion to cuddle up with at night. Even still, she couldn't help but take some time every night to fall to her knees and pray to the three kindred to bring Hieronymous back to her. Maybe it was a selfish wish, but the three kindred had given her life before. Maybe they would have mercy on her and grant her wish now. Please, three kindred, please bring Hieronymous home. Please. Maybe he is living some fairy tale life with her, but I don't want to suffer through this anymore. I just want him back. I know that may make me selfish, but I don't care. I can't take this anymore. Please, three kindred, please. A sudden hand on her shoulder causes her to jump.